excited to be joined this morning by Amber Frost. She is a writer, activist, former co-host of Chapo Trap House, and author of the brand new book, Dirtbag Essays. We'll put it up on the screen, available wherever books are sold now. Welcome, Amber. It's great to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. So first, let's start with what made you decide to write the book now? And one of the things that you talk about is you felt like this particular arc, either in national left politics or in your life, had kind of come to an end. And so you felt like it was an appropriate moment to write the book. So what is the phase that you feel like came to an end that enabled you to write this book?
Well, honestly, I started writing it before it came to an end, which, obviously required some retooling, and we knew that sort of going into it. I knew that I wanted to start sort of with where I came from and how I ended up, on the left, quote unquote, whatever that means. And I ended up in Occupy Wall Street. So I'd already seen that end. And I knew through a lot of smaller moments that most of these things do kind of fizzle out. But, when I was trying to get a book deal, Bernie was very much still on the table and very promising. And I think all of us on the podcast and most of the people I knew going into it were like, not Bernie's going to win, but we're like, this is the best opportunity we've had in a really long time. So I went into it with this maybe kind of attitude. And then I was like, what's going to happen if what is most likely to happen which is that he doesn't win? And then I was like, I'll deal with that later.
But figure that out if and when it comes.
Yeah. Which took a lot longer than I thought because COVID sort of threw me for a loop, and I sort of struggled with kind of trying to find a bow to put on the end of it. And then I guess at some point I just thought, well, you don't have the happiest ending in the world, and you should just be honest about that. It doesn't mean it's the end of the world, but sometimes you lose.
Yeah, that is life, especially life in left politics. I want people to understand this is not just a retelling of what happened with Bernie either in 2016 or 2020. It's kind of, you can tell me if you think that this description is right. It's part memoir, part, description of the journey of yourself and as an activist, but also tracking these major movements from Occupy to Bernie 2016 to Bernie 2020 and, part of COVID that unfolded in recent years. On the Bernie piece, though, what do you think that some of the other retellings of Bernie's loss in 2020, what do you think that they sort of missed, or what do you think that they perhaps got wrong?
Well, I think that there were a lot of very early postmortems, which I wanted to avoid. I think people rushed in to say exactly what happened immediately, which, you don't. I feel like my first impressions walking away were correct, but I did want to give myself some space. I think there were a lot of sort of, Bernie didn't win because, whatever, his coalition was too woke or whatever. I think that comes from a place of anger that I fully understand, that there was kind of a cannibalistic, left that was a part of Bernie's coalition. But really, I think it was as simple as, he faced more opposition from the Democratic Party than he did from the Republicans. We didn't expect him to catch on as much as he did the first time, but when we really went into it for 2016, in earnest, it was a kneecap job. And I think that's one of the most frustrating things, is because, maybe even if they hadn't have done that, he wouldn't have won. But now we'll never know.
Right. Yes. But that's also part of the nature of being a lefty trying to compete in the Democratic Party. You have to just assume that that's going to be part of what you're facing and what you're up against. How do you feel like the quote unquote left broadly, however you want to define that, in America has responded to that loss? There's been a lot of, fracturing. There's been a lot of, ugliness on Twitter. There's been, I feel like, a good amount of nihilism. What's been your reaction to sort of this post-Bernie moment?
It's difficult because I think most of the people I know have pretty strong heads on their shoulders. I do have a few friends that just straight up lost it afterwards. They didn't know what to do with themselves. They had all of their eggs in that one basket, and that makes it difficult. It's difficult to cope with loss, and I think if you don't sort of, cut your teeth on smaller ones, it can be really devastating with something like Bernie. As far as like the left, there's not really a left in the country. There are a lot of, leftists or socialists or whatever. But if you were to describe the left as sort of a powerful political movement, which I would say it has something having, like, at the very least, a party and a labor movement, it's not something we really have. What we have right now is a lot of people that are even further diffused. Bernie really was kind of a North Star. And without that, I think people are really scattered. They're doing the best they can, obviously. I'm encouraged by a lot of the union work that's going on. I'm very happy that I personally don't have to pay that much attention to electoral politics. Living in California, I've lived in blue states for the last many years. But I don't have to carry water for a lot of things. And then it's partially upsetting because it means I have to wait for the very odd left insurgent candidate that has a shot. It ain't great, but you just don't know what's going to happen until it happens. I never really saw Bernie coming in the first place, and I still think he was an amazing opportunity and the closest we've come in my lifetime. But before that, I was just chugging away at kind of labor stuff.
Yeah.
Nothing is going to happen until one day it happens. So you have to sort of just leave room for that chaos energy and try and lay the track. Right now, it's the very dull, boring political work of trying to sort of keep people together and focused on smaller projects.
Like you, I've been extraordinarily excited by the new energy in the labor movement, which is very different than anything we've seen in our lifetimes, where you're actually it's not concessionary contracts. You see these democratic reform movements within large labor unions. You see them, with the American people, firmly behind them, and it's not even partisan. People are overwhelmingly on their side. You see the grassroots effort. So I think if more of that had happened pre-Bernie, you would have had more of the infrastructure actually to support a candidate with his political agenda. So that does make me hopeful for the future. I was wondering also, what you make of all of the grassroots organizing and activism in favor of a ceasefire and against Israel's assault on Gaza. And if that also, obviously it's one of the most horrifying things I've ever seen unfold. But the fact that there's been so much organizing and energy around it also has been sort of hopeful and inspiring to see as well.
Ooh. Sorry, I'm not going to give you a good one on this. I'm not very optimistic. As far as what has already happened, it seems pretty. It's already pretty devastating. I don't think, even at this point, that okay, so this happened for me the first time during the Iraq War. You realize there was huge popular opposition to this thing, Right. And then you also realized that the nation as a political entity has zero accountability to the rest of the world, much less popular opinion. So I think, it heartens me and it gives me faith in humanity that this many people are disgusted and many of them deprogramming themselves from a lot of propaganda. What bothers me is the fact that we don't have a nation that's accountable to broad popular opinion or moral disgust. I think the fact that the U.S. is supporting this and has been not just the occupation, but just putting the boot down. This obviously and this brazenly, without any world support or popular support, is really disturbing. But I do think, just to go back to what you were saying about, the labor could have laid the groundwork. I actually don't. I think that Bernie in some ways invigorated the labor movement. I'm not sure that they would be
that's right.
where they were without that. It's kind of one hand washes the other thing. And one of the things I do see being more powerful is at some point, when a trade union movement is large enough, they do get to influence things like foreign policy. Unfortunately, we have to have sort of a hand in the government to even get to that point already. So it's going to be a slow build, but I don't know. It's incredibly devastating to watch. It's really horrifying, and I think we've already foreclosed on a happy ending.
Yeah. Yeah. That ship has sailed.
It's pretty brutal. Yeah.
What do you make of Bernie and his reaction? I just saw AIPAC tweeting out, they're amplifying his opposition to a ceasefire. I know you describe yourself as a Bernie loyalist through and through in the book.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, too, okay, so it's very interesting, again, to go back to labor. A friend of mine in a very large union will say, has been a part of hostile internal debate about whether or not they should make a statement.
Interesting.
On Israel. And I'm sympathetic to both sides. One is like, well, we should talk about what is right and, the horrible things that's going on there. Two, they're like, look, we aren't in the best position in the world right now. This is going to be very distracting from building the union. And, weak unions grow unions, strong unions influence things outside of the union. As far as Bernie goes, he's always been to the left of nearly everyone on foreign policy. At the same time, he's a man of a certain age. I don't put anyone in Congress or the Senate or even local politics to the standards I hold for, let's say, a millennial podcaster in terms of foreign policy. It's just an old holdover, and at this point, I'm like, it's not. And I don't mean Zionism in particular. I mean like this idea of Israel as the good guy, as kind of a white.
It's like a very Cold War mindset. Like there's the good countries that are on our side. There's the bad countries that are against us.
It's a hangover. I for my part, it's the holidays. I try and stay on message and say, look, I'm against the occupation, and there are no excuses, but there are reasons. And if you turn up the heat high enough, water's going to boil.
Amber, you have a chapter in your book that you talk about, like, sort of your disgust with the liberal theatrics around Trump and how you really rejected, this sort of like performative, who can act the most afraid, who can act the most outraged, et cetera.
Right.
But what are you feeling about the fact that it is very possible, if not very likely, that we end up with another 4 years of Trump?
I'm not sure. First of all, I can't really draw a bead on what the possibility for that is. I think it's really interesting. I mean, first of all, we didn't see it coming in the first place. And that was a real wake-up call for me, because I was like, oh, the death of local newspapers and the lack of news coverage in quote unquote flyover country has really missed some major sentiments going on with most of the people. Like, wow, we didn't see that coming at all. And I think what that made me realize is that we don't really have a way to check the temperature anymore. That it's not just having like news desks locally, but it's about having like local newspapers. It's about having labor press. So I would say the weirdest part of it is that I'm not sure what the actual possibility is. I do think, Biden's infrastructure bill, God knows I hate to give him or, whatever Svengali's running him any credit, but the infrastructure bill is very encouraging. It's something that should have happened a million years ago and Bernie would have done it better, blah, 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 blah. I would be interested to see if that has any effect on the ground. with voters. I think what a lot of people voted for in Trump was like the return to manufacturing, onshoring, American jobs. I mean, jobs are a big deal. People like them. They remember when they had them and they miss them. Good jobs. And I think with the investment in infrastructure, it's actually it is creating more of those jobs. We're now seeing a labor shortage in the hard hats, which are a lot of times excellent jobs that you can get you don't have to pay to get into them. It's not like, you have to have a 4-year degree. It's skilled labor and you're in a union, you can get a pension and all your benefits. And I think if that shows any yield in time for a broader public, I don't see like the resentment for the Democratic Party that really fueled a lot of Trump voting coming to fruition. If he does get elected, I mean, I have no idea, man. The weird thing is that, again, we all were sort of like freaked out when it happened. We're like, oh, holy shit, it's this crazy. And then this is just kind of a consistent trajectory of things getting slightly worse. Like, this is not a rapid decline compared to Obama. It's not great and it's not an improvement. But the strangest thing is that there wasn't a huge disaster. It was just a little shittier every day, just like it had been for the past however many years.
So that's sort of what you anticipate if we get a second Trump term.
I mean, I could see it for sure. It is, he doesn't want to get in strange wars. He always wants to see like who wins in the end. He tends to, I think, spend most of his last administration doing like, I don't know, castle intrigue, court politics. He was way more obsessed with, his own cabinet and hiring and firing people and doing The Apprentice. He wasn't that active of a president.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective because he was obviously incredibly visible. Like it felt like he was an active president, but then not actually that much. I mean, his biggest accomplishment was a bunch of tax cuts for rich people, which any Republican president would basically do. I mean, I guess the thing that does make him different is all of the insanity around the election and January 6th. And it was Keystone Cops, but he legitimately wanted to steal the election.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would say though, but like he didn't, and I don't know. The interesting thing that I saw later after this during the January 6th stuff is they talked to White House security, and they said there were a lot of people that were there January 6th calling in, saying like, "Hey, I left my purse there. I was in there January 6th. Is there a way I could pick it up?" Yeah. And like the head of White House security was like, they literally don't know that what they did was, he's like, these people are not fully in orbit. Like, he's like, they believe that the president told them to do something. And so that it was allowed that they did it. It's like the kind of American mindset when you get like pulled over and you see those people who are like, actually, I'm a sovereign citizen. And it's like, oh my God, no one told you how things work. Yeah. And I think after that, one, that kind of thing is less likely to happen because it wasn't effective. And two, I think Trump doesn't like the amount of trouble he's getting into for, let's say, waiving the...
See, I actually sort of feel the opposite. I feel like once something happens once, it's actually more likely to happen again in the future. Wait, yeah, definitely. I've sort of like ripped the Band-Aid off of, oh, well, that thing is now on the table. That thing is now possible. But
like an Overton window thing.
Exactly.
It did look like they were having fun, but a lot of them did go to jail. I could see it also happening in something like not particularly related to Trump. I don't know if the energy would be behind him in particular. I don't know if he doesn't quite have like the shine for the youth that he did during the time, the downwardly mobile young men who appear to have moved on. But I mean, I could see it around something else, because that energy is still there, that restless resentment.
No doubt
And that
about
feeling
it.
of unfairness and that mental illness, they're all still there. So
No doubt, no doubt. Well, Amber, I've been really enjoying the book. I think you're a fantastic writer. I think your personality, your voice really comes through. And so I encourage people to check out the book. It's excellent. Congratulations. And thank you so much for sharing some of your insights today.
thank you so much for having me on.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.